Hi, this is a tutorial called Power Words that is meant to give you some Photoshop practice and combine some selection tools, typography practice, and basic texture and layers practice. So to get started, what we're going to do first is take a photograph of your hand. Now you could put your photo in by taking a picture with a camera or even emailing yourself a picture of your hand. But since we have a quick and easy application built right into our computer called PhotoBooth, sometimes we just use that to take a quick photograph of your hand. So I'm just going to kind of move aside a little bit here and pose my hand in a couple different ways and figure out how to get a nice photo. We're going to be editing the photo quite a bit in Photoshop anyway, so it's going to look probably pretty bad, not the best resolution, but we're just kind of practicing some skills here. So go ahead and click your photo. I'm just going to do my basic power fist. I notice my sleeve's sort of in the way, so I'm going to take my sleeve down a bit more. Okay, pretty happy with that. Looks a little weird. Hands can be funny when you really dissect the shapes of them. So I'm going to just grab this photo and pull it right out onto my desktop to save for later. I'm going to close that application so I don't have to see myself talking much anymore here. And now I'm going to just simply drag this photo directly into my Photoshop icon. And now I'm going to be cutting it out. Okay, so there's so many ways to cut a picture out in Photoshop, but I find that the most accurate way is to use your pen tool. Now when you're using your pen tool, you're just going to click all the way around. We've practiced this in Illustrator many, many times. And I'm just going to keep going all the way around my hand. You don't want your points to be super close together, but you just want to get a nice little arrangement here of points. And you could use your eraser tool or maybe even some of your selection tools, maybe the magnetic selection tool, but I tend to use this one to make more accurate selections. So there's my basic selection, and right up at the top on your settings there's an option that says make selection. Right now it's just a vector line. When you hit make selection and hit OK, you now have the marching ants around your hand. So now I'm just going to go select inverse, and I'm going to delete everything but my fist. To make that actually happen though, I need to double click my background since that's the actual photo I brought in, so there's no lockbox on it. And now if I hit delete, I should have my fist all by itself. So I'm going to go Command D to deselect, and I'm going to clean this up just a little bit. So here's my hand. I do see a little bit left of the background image in there, so to clean that up, I'm just going to grab an eraser, make sure my settings are all normal up at the top, and I'm just going to clean up some of those little areas where I grabbed the background too. Okay, so we're going to be putting some texture behind it and on it and around it, so it shouldn't be too big of an issue here. Just kind of clean that up. Okay, so now to make my hand a little more interesting, I'm going to go ahead and do some image adjustments. I'm going to go into Image Adjustments, and I'm just going to change it to black and white by going Desaturate. Now I've got a black and white hand. I can move it around. I can put it at the bottom, the top, wherever I want to work on it in this document. Now this hand came in as, like I said, a pretty low resolution image from here. So I probably am going to be just continuing to work with a lower resolution image just for practice here. So the next thing I'm going to do is go back into Image Adjustments, and I'm going to go ahead and change the hue and saturation a bit. I'm just going to colorize it and just kind of look for a color that I think might be just a tad more interesting than my regular black and white. I'm going to pull the saturation up or down a little bit and then hit OK. Now you could really go into your adjustments and really make some big changes. I can change brightness and contrast some more if I wanted to adjust that. And again, this is kind of an abstract project, so you're not really limited to making it a certain way. It's more like, what do you think looks best? Try not to stare at your fist too long or it ends up looking really strange in my opinion. So let's go back to our example picture for a minute here. This is what I started with and or ended with, and I'm just kind of in the hand phase right now. So the next thing I did was I wanted to pull in some textures, and you can always make your own textures, but since we're just practicing, I found a website that has some really neat free textures. It says breathtaking free Photoshop textures. So I'm going to pull through, look at those texture options down here, and find one that I think kind of shows a nice simple background, mostly just texture. So I'm going to go with this one, and I'm just going to pull it right onto my screen, and I'm going to just make it quite a bit bigger, hit return to make it editable. There we go. And then I'm going to rearrange it so the fist is on top of it. Now with this layer, I'm going to take this layer and change it to an overlay mode. And actually, rewind, I'm going to take this layer and make it to an overlay mode. And you should see your fist kind of popping through the background when you do that step. Okay, so you've got your fist and you've got your texture layer. Those two things kind of working together. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust this just a tiny bit more. I'm done with this texture for now. And now I'm going to add, I kind of want like a starburst behind it, or some rays, kind of emphasizing the hand a little bit more. So to do that, I'm going to use my shape tool, which is located in your toolbar underneath all of your shapes, and it's called the custom shape tool. When you use the custom shape tool, you want to make sure that you click on the options up here. If you don't see all your options, there's a little wheel up here, and you can just change it to all. Sometimes your settings just have a couple shapes, and it's nice to have everything in there to work from. So these shapes come in as a vector shape, so I like to use this one. It actually doesn't look like much on this, but if you click on that registration target, I'm going to come out here onto my workspace, and instead of just drawing with it, I'm going to zoom out just a tad here. So option to make that image a little smaller, so I've got a little more workspace. So now when I have that shape, if I hold my shift and I drag nice and big, and remember, push your space bar to sort of move it around in your workspace. And I just kind of want that to sort of come out from the edges of the fist. So now that I have that shape done, it is a vector shape. So the first thing I like to do is rasterize the layer by going up to Layer, Rasterize Shape. Okay, now I've got this layer in white. If I wanted to, I could change the color of the whole layer. I could go to my color overlay or color dodge, or lots of things here, but I think the easiest way is to actually go into my layer, layer style, and do a color overlay in here, or sometimes a gradient overlay if you want it a little more subtle. So now I've got options to change that color. This is really powerful with the bright red, but I think I'm going to stick with sort of the blue tones and kind of mellow it out a bit so it's not as extreme. And then you can also reduce the opacity so it's a little bit more see-through, and then we'll make some adjustments from here. So it's on top of everything right now. I'm going to also do a, might even do a pattern overlay on it. Now when you do a pattern overlay, you're going to be getting the default patterns that kind of come with Photoshop unless you put your own in there. So I actually kind of like the way these bubbles look, so I'm going to keep that there, but I'm going to lower that opacity too, just to give it a slight extra texture to it. And then I'm going to hit OK. So I'm going to put the fist on top of that. Well, let's see, pull that down here. I'm going to put this between those two. I kind of like that look. So I've got everything's sort of circulating around that center. Now my hand is getting a little bit trickier to see, so I may adjust that a little bit more, brighten it up if I need to, or adjust the contrast if I need to, because I want that to show up a lot better than it is. That's on that layer. I'd even take the opacity of this texture layer down just a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to start putting in the text. Before I do that, there are a couple ways you can set this up. I want this starburst not to poke into the hand, so since it's on top of the hand layer, I can just grab an eraser and just sort of get rid of those little pieces that are coming over the hand manually. So I'm just kind of touching that up along the edges with an eraser. And please feel free to make these adjustments however you'd like. This is sort of a loose demo, so as long as you've got kind of a nice end result that involves a fist or a hand and some power words, and you've practiced some texture and Photoshop technique, it's really up to you how you complete it. I know there are a million different Photoshop tools you can work with. It's just nice sometimes to get a chance to really review some of the tools you might not have used for a while. Okay, so now it kind of looks like the hand is in front, and I think in my other demonstration I did it a little differently, but right now I'm kind of liking the really light detail here. So now I'm going to start putting in some text. I'm going to get my T tool. I'm just going to click once, and I'm going to type the word power. And I kind of like this font. If I wanted to change the font, I could easily go up here and get some different fonts, but I like the idea of this mesquite. It kind of has like an old school, I don't know, almost like Western look to it. And it's in white. It's kind of hard to see. Whoops. Let me do that for a second. It's kind of hard to see it, so I'm going to lock this layer actually. It's kind of getting in my way, so sometimes it's nice to lock your background layer so it's not moving around on you. So I need to do something to give this a little bit more power, actually. So I'm going to go layer style. I'm going to look at adding a really simple stroke to it. Might be a little too much with the black, but maybe if I go with my blues, going kind of monochromatic here, something a little bit more in the blue-green. Maybe even like something like this, I think will give me just enough to really let the word stand out a bit more. And I might not even want to stick with white. I'm not sure yet though. I'm thinking it's kind of interesting. So lots of things you can do in here. You can add a gradient overlay. You know, don't go too crazy with layer styles, or sometimes you get too much going on. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it at just that simple outline here, and I'm going to just rotate the word just to kind of mimic the shapes going around the hand. Remember, once you do any rotation or adjustments on a word, you really have to hit return when you're done so that it knows you're completing that step. So now I'm just going to be filling in some different words that I think represent power. I'm just going to do energy and put those around, just kind of work with my fonts. And you know, once you've done some layer styles, you can actually take those effects. I can hold down Option and just duplicate the effects right up to the next word. So you don't have to go in and try to match everything. It will let you just copy that. Oops. Try to rotate that slightly so it kind of fits with the theme. Hit return when you're done. So now I'm going to type 4 or 5 words. I'm going to do strength. Oops, spelling strength right would be a little more powerful. And just kind of position things in an interesting way. Give it some visual interest, and it's got kind of a nice center focal point here. So remember, once you've got that one layer style, you can option drag your effects to each one to give it that matching style. Okay, let me throw a little bit more in here. Let's see, what's another word I used in my other demo? Ooh, passion, love, and soul. Knowledge. Knowledge is a good one. See if I can squeeze that one in for my last word. And I'm going to just wrap this up. I really want people to be practicing just the end result, that visual design concept. Can you make it look interesting? Take a couple simple items and put your own touch to it. So again, I'm not asking you to copy exactly what I've done here. I just want to see you using your tools in Photoshop that you can apply to other projects and make more and more interesting as you go. So I would probably work on this a little more. I still feel like the fist is not as strong as I'd like it to be. But again, they're two different interpretations. I used a different texture on the back of this one. I believe at the end, what I did on this one also was added a new layer and at the very top. And I just got a paintbrush and I looked for some interesting brushes in here, just some texture. And then I made it really big, kind of almost like a stamp. And again, we're pretty low resolution here. But then I just wanted to add just a tiny bit more texture, just kind of give it some more interest, visual interest. We're really playing with texture as an element here. I could go right in the middle if I wanted, but then I'm kind of losing the strength in the imagery. So that's your tutorial. Have fun with it. Create an interesting design. Feel free to do something other than a fist or other than those power words. You can do you know, a peace sign, or you can do a high five or other things if you want to use. It's just kind of a nice image to start with that you've created.